Those who have been to a ruined wedding, what happened? A coworker was at one of best friend's wedding. There were very specific rules about the food, no nuts. There were a couple people there, including the maid of honor, who were severely allergic. The venue served something that had nuts. Maid of honor went anaphylactic. EpiPen was not effective, and she died on the way to the hospital. Needless to say, there are lawsuits abound. We attended a wedding for family member who didn't have a lot of money. It was hosted at an inexpensive venue but was nice. My heart broke when only a third of the people invited showed up. You could see the hurt in the couple's face. They came up to our table and said, "Do you have any friends in city?" We lived an hour away. They had all this food for 100 people but only 30 guests. They were willing to have complete strangers come down just so their money and food wouldn't go to waste. We hadn't handed over our card with cash inside yet, so my husband hit the ATM and added another $100. I'm a wedding photographer. I was at one really fancy one a couple of years ago. Typical outdoor deal at a swanky location in the middle of nowhere. The place was really nice. Had a large concrete stairway flanked by water fountains that led down to the altar area. So the bride could be seen by all like she was ascending from heaven. The ceremony begins and the bridal party come down and take their places. Then the bride appears with her father. She takes 3 or 4 steps down the concrete steps and her shoe twists on her. She tumbled down a good 12 feet or more and busted out the majority of her front teeth in the fall. So much blood all over her. With the place being so isolated, it took a good 40 minutes for ambulance to arrive and she was in intense pain. Ultimately she was okay and I got an email from them weeks later with the reschedule date. This time there was no stairs anywhere in sight. This was one I worked at. After the ceremony, right at the start of the reception, photographer was taking, jumping, photos of the bride and bridesmaids. So they were all jumping in the air while wearing heels. Bride landed and dislocated her knee. Then passed out and kept going in and out of consciousness. We called an ambulance who turned up and fixed her knee, etc. But she wanted to continue with the wedding. She then had the first course of the meal and threw up down her dress. And had to sit with her mum in another room while everyone else danced, etc. Felt so bad for her as she spent the rest of the evening crying. The wedding was at a state park that's famous for its giant gorge waterfall. I don't know whose idea this was, but someone suggested a photo overlooking this gorge and everybody was game. The wedding party went around a stone security barrier and the maid of honor literally fell off the cliff to her death. It was like 500+ feet. I was studying photography and used to act as an assistant to a well-known wedding photographer. Went to a couple's wedding. He shot digital and I shot black and white film. Spent all day with the couple from 9 a.m. through till 2 a.m. the next morning when we left. I could see how genuinely in love they were. It was only a day but I got to know them quite well and really liked them both. The next morning, I get a call from the photographer and his voice was shaky. He explained that the groom had been murdered that night after the reception party. 3 guys had broken into their bungalow to steal wedding gifts. The groom got out of bed to stop them and they executed him in front of the bride. I was in shock for about 2 weeks. This story was in South Africa, if that helps explain how or why this happened. The next weekend, the photographer and I went to the bride's house to present her with the photos. We'd worked together to get the job massively accelerated so she had the photos of her husband. We did it at our own expense and didn't charge her a penny for the day or all the prints and album. Sort of the least we could do. Because my photos didn't matter as much. I'd been able to simply capture those natural moments between them, rather than staged wedding photos. So they had the normal album pics but also about 150 snaps of just them being a couple. She was in tears from the moment we arrived till we left a few hours later. She was a shadow of the women I'd met only a week earlier. That shit still haunts me. Edit. I didn't expect this story to get the attention it has. I'm sorry for any upset this has caused anyone reading this, but I believe it's an important reality check. I loved South Africa in a lot of ways. But it's a very troubled place with insane murder and rape rates. My story is by no means unique or even particularly shocking by South African standards. I also have worse stories like this from friends and neighbors. I have CPTSD from my time living there and the things I'd endured. I've got friends who were diagnosed with PTSD stemming from their time there too. Also, for anyone wanting to read the news article about this event, I hope this dissuades a few people from visiting South Africa. And in doing so perhaps I save a few lives. The bride's father was 45 minutes late to walk his daughter down the aisle. While we were waiting, the air conditioning broke in the venue. It was over 100 degrees outside and humid AF. The place was overcrowded. You could barely move without bumping into someone else, and in the heat that was extra miserable. I guess the air conditioning problem had also affected the refrigeration or something, because most of the food was spoiled. The only food on the buffet was salad. Spaghetti and rolls. Not enough to feed even half the guests. Most people left after the first dance. 2 of the bride's aunts fainted. The bride and the wedding planner were crying. Not ruined, but marred. My ex-wife's grandmother was in her 90s. In a wheelchair. While we're up at the altar. She won't shut up about the flowers and they might need water. She's not talking quietly to her neighbor. She's yelling in her old lady voice. She didn't have dementia. She was very with it. She had no volume control, or what she was doing was inappropriate. She thought the flowers need water. They looked terrible. She yelled. One of the cousins, without saying anything, got up and started to just wheel her out. "Where are we going?" she yelled. We all got chuckle at grandma and went on with the ceremony. Edit. Let me say that she was a very lovely woman. She just had a loud opinion at that moment. A friend of my girlfriend was getting married. The wedding was quite normal. They got married in the local church, and then there was the party in a nice restaurant. The photographer asked the bride and her bridesmaids, my girlfriend was one of them, to go outside for some photos. Some minutes later, one of the bridesmaids come back asking for help. There were some swans that attacked the photographer, and the majority of the people around him were not doing anything much more than laughing at this guy who was running around and screaming. Big wedding. Around 500 people. All the future wife's doing. She wanted the huge $70,000 wedding. I was a groomsman. Pre-wedding. He's nervous as hell. All these people. Has to be perfect. This is her dream wedding. Yada yada. So, at some point the whiskey gets pulled out. It went from a calm the nerves few shots to he's just about finished the bottle. We give him water, get him in the shower, and redressed. It's go time. Midway through her vows, he pukes all down the front of her dress. It was horrible, but it was great. They're going on 8 years strong. My mother was a church organist and attended many weddings. I suppose the story that stands out was of the bride who, when asked, "Do you take this man?" broke down and said, "No. I can't, I don't love him," and ran out of the church. It was a smallish town. People found out that she had met somebody new. Fallen hopelessly in love with him. The groom's father groped both the bride and his daughter. My then girlfriend. Multiple times each. Ended up getting punched out by his son. And locked in a minivan for a few hours until he sobered up. Edit. Half the questions are the same. And the answer is yes. He groped his own daughter. As well as his son's wife. Edit 2. Dude was belligerently drunk. Had been punched. And if memory serves correct, had his hands duct taped behind his back. That's how he was able to be locked in a minivan. Child locks on the rear. And too drunk to find a way to hit the unlock in the front seats while his hands were taped. It was a big wedding. Over 300 people. Turns out the bride had been having an affair with her cousin's husband. The cousin had known for a little bit, but waited until the wedding to go table to table, letting everyone know the bride was sleeping with her husband. Poor groom was blindsided. Worst part was his father-in-law was well off and opened up a restaurant for him. Well, he lost his wife and his restaurant. This didn't happen at a wedding, but at a 30-year wedding anniversary. I was working as a waiter. At an inn. We had ballrooms for private parties and other bigger events. The bride and groom had spared no expense. About 100 guests. 5-course meal. An open bar. A whole day party. We were supposed to close it at 4 in the morning. It was grand. And one of the biggest parties I had waited on so far. After the main course, the husband stood up and held a speech. A long one. He started out reminiscing of when they had met. Their early life together. The hard times they had endured. He then talked at length about how he loved the children. She had birthed him, and told each of them how proud he was of them, their character, and accomplishments. So far it was one of the better speeches I had ever heard. It was heartfelt. He had a lot of charisma. He was well spoken. and funny. But then he turned to his wife again. He told her that he had hated her for the last 4 years of their life together. That she was a toxic narcissistic cunt. That had made him feel miserable. And almost had driven him to suicide. He told her that he knew she had a lover. Pointed him out in the crowd, next to his wife and children. He had evidence and was suing for divorce. Intending to take everything. He gave her the divorce papers right then and there. Then he announced to everyone that he had gotten his own apartment, that movers had moved all his stuff while they were at the party, and that he would be leaving shortly. But everything was already paid for, so they should stay and enjoy themselves. In the stunned silence that ensued, he tipped all staff, dishwashers, bosses, waiters, and busboys $200 each and left. Needless to say, all except family had left the party. Within the hour, attended a wedding reception and was seated near the cameraman. An aunt of mine was sitting closer to the camera and spent the evening commenting and gossiping about everyone. And much of it came out on the video. The cameraman was great. He did 2 copies. One edited and the other no holds barred. The unedited version is the stuff of legend. Bride and groom get shit-faced. Get into fight. Crying, yelling, screaming. Running out into the courtyard. Best man goes to check on them. Finds them rolling on the ground. Not in a sexy way. Best man throws bride out of the way. Slams groom's head into the sidewalk. And pins him down. Bride starts kicking groom in the face. Best man pushes her away while sitting on top of groom. Bride storms off with bridesmaid. Best man lets groom up, who begins kicking and punching trees and breaking the posts off a gazebo, saying, "I'm gonna kill myself." Best man tells bridesmaid to go grab the police officer from inside for assistance. Police officer comes out and tries to help get groom to his room. Wedding was at a fancy hotel. Groom proceeds to talk shit and be disrespectful with the officer and ends up getting arrested. Father of groom disowns him. Yells at bride. Best man and his date end up taking care of bride and groom's child and staying in their honeymoon suite for the night. Source: I was the best man. Edit: I'll explain the slams head into sidewalk part. The groom was on his back on the ground. And the bride was on top of him. He's basically giving her a bear hug, while she's screaming and flailing. So as I come around the corner, all I see is a man holding a screaming woman, rolling around on the ground. I'm completely startled by what I'm seeing. Also, mind you, it's dark out there. So when I threw her off of him, I was straddling his chest. And I put my palm on his forehead and pushed it to the sidewalk. Maybe 3 inches. Just a quick reset button. I literally immediately said, "I'm sorry I hit you. Are you okay, man?" He replied, "It's okay. I'm okay." All while still holding him. Y'all are acting like I picked him up and dumped him straight on his head from 4 feet in the air, lol. I was not trying to hurt him. Or her for that matter. I was simply trying to end their physical confrontation. Hence why I stayed on top of him. Tried to stop the kicks and pushed her away when she came back for more. And told her to leave. Which is when we stormed off with the bridesmaid. That was the de-escalation period. I wasn't holding him down so she could kick him. Now take my word for it or not. This guy would never hit her, which is why I was so startled in the first place. Come to find out, the groom was bear hugging her like that to prevent her from hitting him in the face anymore. And they were on the ground because they were both hammered and tripped while she was hitting him. After I let him up, he was basically realizing all the crazy bullshit that happened and was completely besides himself, hence the punching of trees and the like. I couldn't control him anymore, which is why I asked for the officer, who was trying to help me get him into the hotel room, up until the groom started yelling, "Take me to jail. Take me to jail," in the middle of the lobby. You just can't reason with drunk people once they get going. So yes, the story says slammed head into sidewalk, which is true. But y'all's imaginations are going wild. Went to a coworker's wedding about 15 years ago, and this technically happened at the reception. It was a beautiful outdoor venue overlooking a lake. Anyways, the groom had planned to sing a song to his new wife and have fireworks launch as he was singing the last note. Well, that last note came, but the fireworks did not. He held that last note for a good 10 seconds before he finally yelled, "Motherfuckers." Threw the mic down and ran to go fight the fireworks guy. No fists were thrown, but somebody did end up in the lake. The party kinda broke up after that. They also ended up getting a divorce about a year later after the groom got fired from his job for showing his dick to his boss's underage daughter. Edit: I'm sorry to say that after 15 years I don't remember the song, but the last word of the song was "Baby A." Edit 2. I don't think it was "Kissed by a Rose" by Seal. Edit 3. Thanks to Lippincott Elvis, I now know the song was "When I'm With You" by Sheriff. My dad has vintage and veteran cars. When I was younger he used to do some weddings with them. I loved clearing out the confetti from the car when he'd get home. One week he arrived back and there was no confetti in the car. On the way to the church the bride changed her mind, and instead of taking her and her father to church they asked if he could drop them at the local zoo as it's her favorite place. So he did. Left them there in full wedding attire. They were going to get a taxi home when they were done. It was the days before mobile phones too, so I'm guessing PPL were waiting at the church for quite a while. Edit veteran cars are made before 1919. Vintage 1919 to 1930 in the UK, that is. Also, I've just called my dad to ask him if he remembers this, and he seems to think, from what he could overhear, that she was only getting married because she was pregnant and thought she had to. Was early 80s. He also told me he did 2 weddings where the groom never showed up. A fight broke out between father of the bride, brother of the bride, and some guy that just happened to be staying at the hotel. In reality I don't know how much of a fight it was. More just the dad and brother assaulting some man. So anyway, they were both arrested. Cut to the bride sobbing at breakfast because her dad and brother spent the evening of her wedding in jail and now face assault charges for what they did to this poor man. I went to a wedding where the bride and groom bought the wedding package on Groupon. Which is fine. Why spend a fortune for one day? But I guess the venue thought they could cut some corners. So they stuck us in a room that smelled so strongly of cat urine some people immediately left. The only drinks were those from a vending machine. It was next to an airport, so every time a plane took off the ceremony had to be paused because you couldn't hear anything. And the day after the event, every single one of us had food poisoning. Edit. Bonus story, because even though it didn't ruin the wedding for the couple, it ruined it for the bridal party. I was a bridesmaid for my friend. Flew across the world for over 10 hours to be there. Had to do the setup of the venue. Assign people to rooms. Put signs on doors. Finish the seating chart. Transport food. Redo her bouquet because she didn't like it. Etc. Etc. The whole time she's rude and tells everyone within earshot that the bridesmaids aren't helping. Her maid of honor was absolutely bending over backwards trying to keep her happy, and instead of being grateful she instead told her sister, "I should have asked you to be my maid of honor instead." She was pretty cold to me and kept asking if I'd lost weight. I said yes because I had been ill but didn't think much of it. At the reception her new husband takes the opportunity to read the speech she clearly wrote for him to say to me, "We are so glad you fit into your dress." In front of over 100 people. I don't speak to her anymore, and neither does her maid of honor or other bridesmaid. Bride and groom decided to go get a few pictures right after the ceremony. They disappeared for about 5 hours. We all waited at the venue. Since no one got any word from them, the buffet wasn't set and the DJ didn't play any music. After 2 hours most guests decided to collect some cash, and we talked the manager of the venue to get out the buffet and the DJ to play music. So we basically started the party without the wedding couple. When they finally got back, they were in shock because basically all food was gone. People were drunken and happily dancing, and everybody forgot that this was their wedding. So the wedding itself wasn't ruined, but everything around it. Well, us guests had a great time after all when we took things in our own hands. An LT update. Since everyone is asking, they actually took pictures during that time. The photographer did his best, but TBH. The couple wasn't that good looking but pretty vain, and thought the photo guy could simply work some voodoo magic on the spot to make them look good. He was pissed to say the least and actually tried to talk them into going back. Was a guest of friend of the bride. Did not know anyone attending. Very expensive over-the-top place. Several hundred guests of this very Italian wedding. Maid of honor grabs mic at the cocktail hour, begins her speech. Rambling. Drunk. Quickly devolves to stating the recently deceased mother of the bride was against this wedding and that's basically what killed her. Plus Vinny will never give up prostitutes. She is tackled by several people and dragged away. The happy couple is separated and divorced within a year. Father of the bride died suddenly 3 days before the wedding, pre-COVID. Daddy-daughter dance was mom. Bride. And picture of dad. Same with walking down the aisle to give her away. Lots of tears. Not many smiles. Even the bartender at the hotel knew the night before and was talking about it with me. During the mixed-gender bachelor party, the bride-to-be got in a spat with the groom and slept with another guy. Wedding was off the next morning. They lost $10,000 plus. He took her back a couple of months later. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.